Today, I want to tell you a story about something I learned while in therapy. I learned about the earth-shattering concept of radical acceptance. Now, many of you are probably wondering, what the heck is radical acceptance? It is the ability to accept situations that are out of your control without judging them. For some people, this concept can be very complicated, and I was one of them. It was about 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, on Mother's Day, May 12, 2019, when my father suddenly passed. I felt the whole world come crashing down around me, leaving me drowning in an unimaginable pile of emotional debris. My father had always been a big part of my world, and his sudden death left a huge hole in my heart that to this day I cannot fill. On top of having to process this immense pain, his mother, my grandmother, stole his ashes and disappeared, and no one has heard from her since. When I got the call that she took his ashes and disappeared, my world ended for a second time. Not only did I have to go on without a parent, I was unable to say my last goodbyes and lay him to rest properly. I spent months in agonizing pain and suffering. I was barely able to get out of bed. I was sick with grief and anger. Grief over losing my father and blinding rage over my grandmother stealing my father from me. I also felt a deep pit of helplessness because I could not track down my grandmother and get my dead father back. I felt all those emotions all day, every day, and it was debilitating. This was the first time I had ever felt this level of grief, so I didn't understand why or if it was okay to have such strong feelings. However, I then began to work with a therapist who helped me realize that it was in fact okay for me to have such grief due to the loss of my father. When anyone loses a loved one, they are bound to feel grief. I learned through therapy that the emotions I felt were perfectly normal for the situation. Then the 7 stages of grief began. The shock set in. His death was so sudden, and the news was delivered to me in a phone call that didn't seem real. I did not know what to say or do, but I was eerily calm. Then the denial set in. I hadn't actually seen my father yet, so how could he really be dead? I talked to him on the phone, and he sounded okay not too long ago, so it wasn't possible. Next, the white-hot anger set in. About 2 weeks before his death, he had suddenly been hospitalized, and I was told in recovery from heart surgery. Heart surgery! This was a man who faithfully went to the gym. I called the hospital trying to visit him, and he refused to let me talk or visit him. How dare he do that to me? How dare he deny me the chance to see him on his deathbed? As a matter of fact, how dare he die in the first place? It was like a last malicious dig just to hurt me. I felt rage for weeks. Then I began to try to bargain and blame myself. If I had denied my father's wishes and went to visit him in the hospital, I could have talked to the doctors and done something differently. In a way, I felt it was my fault because I didn't do enough when I found out he was sick. I should have put my personal feelings aside and been a better daughter. Maybe I could have saved him. This led to me blaming myself, which led to a deep spiral of depression. This depression lasted for months, and I felt trapped in this depression with no way out. The hardest thing to accept was my grandmother and her actions. I remember her doing things like taking me shopping and taking me out to eat. I used to love my grandmother. I would count down the days until she would visit me, and then not leave her side for the duration of her trip. How could she do this to me and my brother? Why would she do this? Didn't she care about me? Was she selfish? Did she just lose her mind? These were questions that were constantly going around in my head. I was unable to get in contact with her and get any answers to my many questions, and that enraged me to the point that it made me physically sick. After being like this for a while, I began to realize this is not a sustainable way to live. I could not live in a stage of debilitating anger and helplessness all the time. So with the help of my therapist, I started on my journey on the road to radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is a term coined by Marsha M. Linehan, a famous psychologist and author who is currently a professor of psychology and an adjunct professor of psychiatry at the University of Washington. She is the developer of dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a type of psychotherapy that combines behavioral sciences with ideas like acceptance and mindfulness. According to Linehan, radical acceptance is when you stop fighting reality, stop throwing tantrums because reality is not the way you want it, and let go of the bitterness. A pillar of radical acceptance is accepting reality without judgment. This can be very hard to do, as we all naturally tend to categorize the experiences in our lives as bad or good. But we can get lost in those judgments, wrapped up in all of those emotions. This makes it difficult to accept reality. It is all natural for us as human beings to project expectations for certain outcomes in life. But when something does not go as planned, we often experience negative emotions because of it. Radical acceptance urges us to bear witness to events in life while remaining emotionally detached from the desired outcomes. This doesn't mean that you go through life emotionless, but rather you should feel your emotions, but should not judge them. Radical acceptance is for when you feel like your life is out of control and the world is not how you want it to be. Nothing that was happening to me in that moment was how I wanted it to be. Of course I didn't want my father to die. Of course I didn't want my father's side of the family to act the way they did. The fact that I couldn't change any of it is what made me feel so helpless. My subconscious went wild trying to come up with scenarios for what could possibly be happening because I could not accept reality. I would have frightening, realistic, and persistent nightmares, some I still have to this day, about revenge fantasies regarding finding my grandmother and forcibly making her give me back my father's ashes. I would go through periods of time, which have become less frequent but still occasionally happen, where I believed he was alive and the whole thing was just a hoax. These times would be when I drift furthest from reality, and as much as I try to stay in reality, sometimes I slip back, and that is okay. It is okay because I know there is a difference between what is real and what is not. I know how to experience my emotions without judgment, but I know in the end I must accept reality. Radical acceptance is especially helpful when dealing with one-sided conflicts. This is when only one person in what should be a two-person conflict is engaging. In this instance, the person engaging in the conflict will feel frustration and anger that is amplified by the lack of engagement on the other side. These negative emotions come from the fact that you cannot control other people. You cannot force people to do or feel how you want them to. Accepting that lack of control is a very important part of radical acceptance. You must accept that you are the only person that you can control, and you can only control your own reactions. Once you are able to radically accept the things that you cannot change, you are freed up mentally to focus on what you can change. You can change yourself and whatever life throws at you. Once you stop trying to fight reality, you can focus on problem solving to get yourself out of undesirable situations, focusing on the facts of the moment and dealing with them. I first had to come to the very painful realization that I could not control my grandmother's actions. She did what she did, and I cannot change that. I had to accept that I did not have the legal or mental resources at the time to mount a dirty fight against this reality. I was wasting energy and emotions fighting a mental battle that I could not win. It took a long time for me to fully process and understand this. It was a painful but necessary realization. Although this reality was unpleasant, there was nothing I could do to change it. But it was, in fact, unpleasant, and I allowed myself to feel emotions towards the situation itself without trying to change it. The next thing I did was accept the pain. Although this compounded loss was very painful and emotional for me, I gradually learned to accept and believe that I was not always going to feel this undiminished pain. I could look at my pain in the moment and accept and believe that it would lessen over time, which I am thankful to say it has. I am so thankful that I no longer feel the crippling pain and suffering all day, every day that I was plagued with during the first year of my dad's death. Being able to radically accept the circumstances has made it much easier to quantify my pain and to not put myself through unnecessary suffering anymore. Another skill that helped me deal with radical acceptance was self-validation. I could tell myself that based on what happened to me, it was okay to have certain feelings that I would have. Your dad died. It's okay to cry and be upset. Feeling out of control is an uncomfortable feeling. It is okay to feel anxious about it. I had to give myself permission to feel those unpleasant feelings. So in addition to radically accepting my situation, I was also validating my emotions. This was my journey to radical acceptance, but it does not look the same for everyone. It is not an easy concept to grasp. It took me about 3 years in intensive therapy to become really good at it, but I am a much better person and a much more socially resistant person because of it. I feel a sense of freedom now that I am able to accept the things around me that I cannot change. I am no longer bogged down with frustration and misery that comes with trying to change the things that I can't. I now have more time to focus on the things that I can change, like how I interact with the people around me. Radical acceptance has set me free, and I believe it can set you free too. In some situations, you are the only person holding yourself back from change, and radical acceptance can release you from your own emotional chains. Even in situations that you cannot change what is happening around you, it can help you to change your outlook. It can help you to change yourself. Radical acceptance also teaches you how to observe your emotions so you can be more in tune with yourself. Many people often have a hard time labeling their emotions. Labeling your emotions can help you get a better handle on them and help make you more in tune with yourself. Radical acceptance has become a permanent part of my mental toolkit and has helped me deal with not only the trauma I spoke about, but current traumas that we all face today, like this pandemic. It is very easy to get bogged down emotionally in this pandemic. So much is going on that we are unable to control. Many of us want it to end yesterday. But there is not much we can do. We cannot control how other people react to the pandemic either. Radical acceptance will help you free up yourself and help you focus on what you can change and observe your emotions. For example, you may not want to be stuck in quarantine, but that doesn't mean you cannot do certain things for yourself, like exercise or call a friend. This is all part of self-care and love that is important for maintaining a healthy existence. Getting to the point of radical acceptance can be a bit of a messy process. Every time I think I have mastered it, another painful event occurs, which is life, and I have to begin down the road of radical acceptance once again. Radical acceptance is a method that helps you move through life without falling into deep, dark pits of despair or other strong emotions. To close, there is an old prayer written by theologian Reinhold Niebuhr that my mom says hangs in many households in Guyana, where she is from. It is the prayer for serenity, which pretty much encapsulates radical acceptance. It goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you.